That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks?
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Remarkably, episode 17 of The Fear of God. As Shania Twain would say, looks like we made it. I am one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse. Typically with me is Reed Lackey, but he went looking for an old high school buddy, and I don't know, some weirdness ensued, and I'm just kidding. Reed, there you are, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing all right, man. Boy, I'm going to start, the episodes that you lead, I'm going to start being very specific, just because I want to see what you come up with for what strange and mysterious thing that I'm actually doing.
Yes.
Instead of sitting here recording with you.
Exactly. Well, really, you're sitting there recording with me.
That's true.
You're not like sitting here with me.
That's true.
You're sitting way, way over there. So yes, Fear of God listeners, thank you for joining us once more. This week, I dare say we have a bit of a present for you. You know, I mean, it's possible, Reed, you could say we're going to put a little bow on this one, you know?
Yeah. I like it. You could almost say that we have an early Christmas gift for our listeners.
You could, but see, you just went ahead and did it. So,
oh yeah,
I guess so much for playing with the language anymore. You just hand it to them. So yes, in fact, today we are talking about the Joel Edgerton. Joel, right?
Yeah, it's Joel.
Okay, mm-hmm. Right. Joel Edgerton, written and directed, impressively so, The Gift. Reed, anything we need to talk about? I mean,
well, I think we can kind of dive right into it. One of the things that I think is so interesting about this, you mentioned that he directed and wrote it, but I mean, he also produced this. This is a complete, like, Joel Edgerton work. You know, soup to nuts, this is his baby. This is, a story that he was clearly, since he wrote it, clearly wanted to tell, wanted to direct it, stars in it. And I think as a first feature outing, it's an outstanding movie. I really, in watching it a second time, yes, listeners, I've only seen this twice. In watching this a second time, it just stood out to me so much, even as I'm watching it.
So you could say it was a regift.
It was a regifting. Yes, exactly. Oh boy. Everybody get your spiked eggnog ready for all of the puns, all of the gift puns that are going to take place. But, I just as I was watching it, I was worried that my rewatching of it was going to be perhaps a bit duller now that I knew some of the conceits of the film.
It's a gift you'd already received. I mean, like,
yeah, but it kept on giving because it really, I just found myself completely getting swept away in it again. You know, like I just feel like it's. I don't know if it's something that's on a personal level. Maybe this is something we're going to explore through the episode, but there's something about this film that I just really strongly connect to and strongly respond to. Even though this would, kind of like 10 Cloverfield Lane, this would not necessarily be classified strictly as a horror film. Maybe not even vaguely as a horror film. It's definitely a thriller.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not like gory or anything, but I think, in fact, what I wrote down was it falls into like the stalker subgenre. I agree with you. I agree with you. Thriller is an appropriate word, but I don't think it's a stretch to put it in there with the horror movies.
Well, thank you for validating that, because I was about to apologize
that's what I'm here for.
I appreciate it.
It's like with you as always is Garth. That's what I'm here for.
Oh, and I am not worthy. But yeah, I mean, I think there's just, like I said, and maybe some more of why will come out as we sort of talk through this and unpack a little bit of this movie. But there's something very resonant in me with this story. And it isn't just the theme that's present and at times almost even on the nose of, bullying.
Is it the monkey mask?
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is that monkey mask.
Let me ask you something. We didn't plan on this, and I can answer first if you want.
Oh boy!
So this movie is all about the gift. This episode will air in December, and it's Christmas relevant. Reed, what is and this, I'm sort of giggling leading up to this question. It's really meant to actually be a question to you. Can you remember a really bad gift you received? I mean, in the course of this movie, there's a lot of gifts, actual physical gifts that happen. There's metaphorical, but also literal gifts that are given to the protagonist of the, you've got a look on your face like you know exactly how to answer this.
Well, I've got a look on my face that's like, I know the answer. I absolutely know the answer. I'm just worried they may eventually listen to the podcast. Because there was somebody, I think it'll be vague enough if I don't give the context in which I knew them, but there was somebody, who I would see repeatedly in a recurring fashion, because of I'll call it a project that I was working on. And, through the course of this project time, I had somebody who would usually give me something as I left their home. And it was so apparent every single time that they gave it to me that it was whatever they could find in their pantry or whatever, that one time I left with this dusty, nowhere near a box, just this dusty old, Santa fountain that is supposed to sit out in your lawn. And it had cobwebs on it and everything still. They gave that to me.
Wow.
They gave me a sizable amount of, expired food. And
well, you're a skinny guy, Reed. It's understandable that someone might think you just need to eat a little bit.
I know, but there's a difference between being a skinny guy and this guy's clearly a garbage disposal. And it was so funny because then I would bring this stuff home and my wife would be like, why do you take this stuff? I'm like, what do you want me to say? Do you want me to look at it and be like, no, I'm good.
Right,
please throw this away instead of give it to me? I mean, this is one of the most uncomfortable, awkward things to think about. Just sitting there oh my gosh, I have to just look and say, thank you so much. And then just, take it home and, find some, most of the stuff just honestly just kind of went in the trash. But that's the first thing I thought of the moment because I was on this, what I'm calling a project for an easy year and a half, 2 years. And, there was a sizable amount of things that I came home with that
that's hilarious.
Nobody should have ever had. How about for you?
Yeah, I've got two answers. One related to you and one related to my wife who's in the other room. But,
boy, the two people who love you so much.
Right. Exactly. You and I have a rich history, a long friendship at this point, and often we'll exchange gifts at birthdays and Christmas. And I'll let you fill in the gaps. I just remember specifically this. I
know exactly where you're going.
Well, there's one of two you might think I'm going. We'll see if you're right. So for listeners, in the year 2002, Reed and I moved together out to Southern California, and like Felix and Oscar, but even more confined, we're just in each other's presence for 24 hours a day for weeks and weeks on end. And there is nothing but love between the two of us, but that gets confining. And Reed, God bless him, he introduced me to, and I have great respect and affection for recent Nobel laureate Bob Dylan, but Reed Reed adores the man, which rightfully so. But when you're in confined spaces with a person for hours and days and weeks and sometimes months on end, and all you hear is Bob Dylan's shrill, intoning.
Can I hear that again? Oh man, it's the best.
It can start to grate. Grate, great.
It is absolutely great.
Yes, I'm sure. Make America great again.
Oh, there you go.
There you go. Grate. Yes, and it's working. But enough of that. So yes, we'd found a place to live. This is before iPhones and smartphones, and we would lug the big CD player around to listen to the music. And he would listen to Bob Dylan all the time. And it comes to, was that Christmas or was it?
That was Christmas. Yeah. No. It was Christmas. You were about to leave to go home to spend the actual holidays. So we did it a little early, but it was absolutely for Christmas.
Well, and clearly you can see where the punchline of this goes. Like, Reed hands me this gift, and I think I had already given you whatever I was going to give you, and it was actually something thoughtful and nice and kind and and reflective of a knowledge of you. And then you hand me this gift, and I open it, and it's a Bob Dylan CD. And what happened? Do you remember the look on my face?
The look on your face is about all I remember from this story, but I just remember like you opening it and then looking up at me, and listeners can't see our faces right now, but looking up at me, and I had just the widest grin on my face. Like I was so proud of having given you this gift, and you're looking up at me, and I saw without words, just a half a dozen thoughts go through your head at one time. Like, is he serious? Is he serious? Please tell me he's not serious. Please tell me this is not true. Please tell me he just not just give me this Bob Dylan CD and be so proud of it that he's giving me a Christmas gift and all.
But it was a gag. It was a joke. You played it well. The other one I'll try to do in brief. So right after my wife and I moved to Charlotte, where we currently reside, because I didn't have a job yet, I just consumed a lot of television, namely the TV show Smallville, which I even in hindsight, I'm not 100% sure what. I mean, I think we developed some peers that were into it, and I had not watched it at that point. And I mean, just consumed this show for hours and days at a time. This is before kids, of course, when you could still do this kind of silliness. And what Tracy, my wife, didn't know at the time was I was pretty ambivalent about the show. Like, I liked kind of the first season or two, but I really at that point, after that, was just kind of watching it because I was in it, and I don't like to stop things. So she doesn't know that. She just knows Nathan just watched an enormous amount of TV specific to one very specific show. So that Christmas, my sweet wife is handing me my first gift, and I open it sort of like your Bob Dylan, though she didn't intend it as a joke. And it's Smallville season 1. And in my head, I'm like, all right, you can't be a jerk. And, I had Smallville season 1. So you got to smile and be thankful and say, yay. So then she hands me the next gift, and I open it. It's Smallville season 2.
Oh my gosh.
Wait. Then she hands me another gift.
Oh no.
And it's Smallville season 3.
Oh my god.
All of a sudden I went from feeling like, oh, well, I've got Smallville season 1. All right. To having 3 of them and thinking, I don't even know how you do this. How do you do this as a married person? Navigate this conversation of like, thanks.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome.
The gift.
So great. The gift.
Yeah, it just kept on giving.
Oh, it's so true. I will say before we hop off the Smallville, this is relative to nothing related to gifts, but my wife and I were also in the first year of our marriage, I think, traveled through the entire run of Smallville, and we have very fond memories of just, sort of the early days of our marriage and watching Smallville, and, just a lot of fun things, even though I feel the same way you do. Like I kind of adored the show early on and felt a little bit more tedious about it as time went on, but a lot of fond memories of just remembering that show. But one show that we watch right now that we enjoy quite a bit is the new Supergirl. And so it was funny because we were all out with our family at Universal Studios very recently, and we get off of the Harry Potter ride, and we're reconvening with the rest of our immediate family, and just sort of, my father-in-law, mother-in-law were there, and Jen's sister and her husband, family, and everything, and so we've got a group there, and all of a sudden Jen just looks at me and says, "Look over there," and I look over, and it's Supergirl.
Did she say, "Up in the sky"?
No.
It's a bird.
That would have been better. I think she, yeah. But see, here's the practical thing: is she was trying to get me to look over my shoulders. So if she said, "Love to look up in the sky," I would have done that, and I would have missed it. But
you just had to get this story in, didn't you?
Yeah, it's so funny. But yeah, I look over and there's Melissa Benoist, and sure enough, like, it's really funny because as much of a fanboy as I think I am, my father-in-law is good Lord, I love him. He is so much a fanboy. Like if he sees somebody from a show that he watches or from something so I just sort of lean in and say, hey, we love your show, and move on thinking, okay, she's here with her family and she's going to go do this, the Universal Studios thing. But then the next thing I know, I turn around and like my father-in-law is like talking to her and he's having a conversation. And, to her credit, to her immense credit, she was far more gracious than she probably needed to be, because she stopped and took pictures with us. And she and her husband, Blake Jenner, who he's been on the Supergirl show before and everything. But you said Smallville, and I just, that was
and you just couldn't resist.
I couldn't resist, man, because
it was a gift.
Yeah, it was. That was like a cool gift. That was like it was like that wasn't no Bob Dylan's 3 seasons of Smallville gift. No. That was like Jesus shining down. Like, let me show you what I'm gonna do.
That wasn't no old Chef Boyardee as you're leaving the house.
What?
You're people who handed you old food.
Oh, now it makes sense. I was like, are you hungry? What are you talking about, Chef Boyardee? What in the world is it? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, we're here to talk about Joel Edgerton's The Gift, but you never quite know what we're gonna give you when
this is our gift to our listeners
here at the Fear of God.
Okay, so let's redirect. Let's set the wrapping paper to the side, and there's another gift behind the tree over here, and open this up. So I had never seen The Gift. I knew that I was aware of it when it came out, and remember people on Facebook or what have you talking about it. I remember just it getting some buzz, but I had not seen it. Was this your second time or 10th?
Yeah, this was my second time. Watching it for this was my second time seeing it.
Do you know? You probably do, but old Joel Edgerton was also young Uncle Owen in
I do know that.
Attack of the Clones. Little baby.
I do know that. I didn't put it together until even after seeing. I saw him in Warrior, and of course loved him in that.
Warrior's so good.
Yeah, and then I saw him in this, and it wasn't until after seeing both of those that I put together that he was Uncle Owen.
He's also in a Midnight Special that you just watched a couple months ago.
That's right. And I love him.
What's interesting about seeing him in The Gift? He does not look like himself.
No, and that's intentional. Yeah.
Like, was there a prosthetic or something? Do you know?
No. What he did, I found out that he basically dyed his hair, purposefully gave himself like this really bad dye job. Like this sort of like unnatural color, because he wanted his character to have an immediately off-putting look, because he's a handsome man. He's athletic. He's not somebody that you would immediately feel sort of put off by if you were to see him in a film. And especially like he's played a number of leads, and so he specifically wanted his character to have this sort of something's off about this guy. Right. So I do
love that the goatee and the earring are a perfect way to do that. In fact, I wrote that down. The goatee and the earring. Isn't it funny? That's an immediate tell. This person's not credible. This person's going to be someone you're not sure about. Why? Because he's got a goatee and an earring.
That's right.
Speaking of him, I'm really anxious to see. Actually, speaking of Midnight Special, Jeff Nichols, who directed that, has just released Loving. That is
badly want to see that.
It might be in wide release right now. We're recording in early November, but that looks very, very powerful, very good. Regardless, The Gift. So, yes, first time I'd seen it. One, in terms of just, as we often do on our show, just talking about likes and dislikes about the movie itself. I was happy to see, and I feel stupid. I didn't IMDb her actual name before doing this, but the gal from Fargo. The neighbor. The TV show Fargo.
Oh, yes. Allison Tolman. Yeah.
So that was fun to see. I really did. I haven't seen season 2 of Fargo, but really enjoyed season 1. And, so that was fun to see her show up in there. It's funny, you watch a movie like this, and we talked on Witches about the faculties the film medium affords you. And there's this specific moment in the store. And again, I knew nothing about the movie. I didn't even really know what the subgenre was. I just didn't know what I was getting into. but there's a moment when they're in the store when they first encounter Gordo, you know?
Right.
Where the clerk asks them for some info and you don't even see this happen on screen, but you hear it. The audio of him conveying their address.
Yes.
And in that immediate moment, I was like, yep, there it is right there. Like whatever's about to happen in this movie, it starts right there.
Yeah.
Is him overhearing their address. So to me personally, like, I think there was a lot to like about this movie. It's got a great tone. It's very encroaching. It's kind of, you know, you mentioned a minute ago, thriller or horror. As a married person, this is a horror movie.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is kind of, if there's a subgenre for it, this is marriage horror. And so I think they really nail a lot of that. I think just as a kind of what ultimately reveals itself as kind of this cat and mouse thing, he really nails that sort of thread. And, you know, God bless him. I love some Jason Bateman. You know, I've enjoyed him ever since, you know, for me personally, Arrested Development was what really, of course, put him back on the map. And that's just a heck of a show. But
you didn't see Teen Wolf 2?
I'm sure I probably did at some point. We'll probably cover that one, you know, for the fear of God. Teen Wolf 2. Not Teen Wolf. Teen Wolf 2.
It'll be, specifically Teen Wolf 2 with Jason Bateman. Well, and I think I obviously also adore Jason Bateman. I've seen a lot of, you know, sort of his recent surge in popularity as heading up a bunch of comedy films, but this is hands down, I mean, no contest, even above Arrested Development. This is my favorite performance I've ever seen him in. I think he delivers such a solid performance in this that I want him to get different kinds of work than he typically tends to get. I think he's kind of always plays the over it guy in any sort of comedy. You know, like he's just over life. He's over whatever situation he's in. He's just above it and over it. And he's already, the moment you meet him in any film, he's already tired of whatever's going on. And this provided such an opportunity for him to play some beats that I wasn't really prepared for, especially the first time I saw it. You know, you're not prepared for him to be as genuinely unlikable as his character becomes throughout the course of the film. But I think all of the acting is strong. Joel Edgerton obviously delivers a great performance. Rebecca Hall delivers a great performance. Even the sub characters that only are in a scene or two, they all deliver fine performances. But the real standout for me in this is Jason Bateman. I think Jason Bateman just absolutely hits a home run from a performance perspective. And that was part of what drew me in seeing it the second time, is I'm like, oh yeah, I love watching his performance in this and watching sort of the ripping away of the veneer that we see in the first like 15, 20 minutes where he's just kind of playing what we're used to seeing him as. But that definitely shifts. And I love watching him as an actor really relish that shift and play those different beats.
Well, and you and I talked earlier today, like, I totally agree with you. I think the casting is very strong. Jason Bateman, what I actually wrote down is I put his name and then a slash and wrote Kyle Chandler, who I also adore. And they don't have the same kind of warmth. I mean, Kyle Chandler is definitely sort of exudes a more warmth than necessarily Bateman might. But what I'm trying to say is you naturally like them. You know, you see Jason Bateman on screen, you see a Kyle Chandler on screen, you just kind of like those guys. And so it's interesting in terms of the casting, you know, to sort of flip that on its head a bit, that the affection you may just inherently have for Jason Bateman really gets put to the test in this particular movie. So, you know, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about a few elements. I feel bad when I say, well, I didn't like X, Y, or Z, because that makes it sound like I'm somehow dismissing the movie. And I actually don't mean that at all. I found the movie very, very effective at what it was going for. And in fact, really unsettling, you know, and kind of in the way it's intending. But there were a few elements that are important for the plot, but for me personally felt a bit of, I had to just sort of buy in on. And two of those specifically was, one, for me personally, it was a bit of a stretch that she is so accommodating to Gordo so early. I just think for a character that feels like a very kind of vulnerable, you start to learn a little bit about background, very kind of fragile background in terms of her experience and life experience. To me, it felt like a big buy-in that she's that sort of open to his coming around the house, coming in the house. I don't know. Again, maybe it's a nitpick, but it just felt like, okay, well, that feels like a stretch that it's that quick, but I'm going to go with it because clearly it's going to serve this story. And I think sort of in the spirit of that too, you just outlined your affection for Bateman's performance, which I wouldn't disagree with. I think the feature film makes it challenging sometimes to make these sort of about faces that characters have. And I always struggle with when in a story, when two characters are in deep relationship with each other and it's revealed that one of them has this enormously rich secret life they've kept from them. And in this particular scenario, in this particular story, again, sort of like her accommodating of Gordo so early, it felt like a big ask, which I was willing to do, but it felt like a big ask to buy that he's got that much dirt on these people and that's his actual persona anyway. So again, that may be nitpicking, but those were a few things that did kind of stand out to me as like, I wish there could have been a few more, even 10 more minutes of runtime or a little more organic getting there. Sure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it does make sense. I mean, I'm going to agree with one element and disagree with another one only slightly. I think, I don't even know that I would disagree with it. I'll nuance it a little bit. That like where I'll agree with you is I definitely feel like it's difficult in the feature length runtime. You're with these characters for an hour and a half, hour, 45 minutes. And so it's difficult to really buy in when you see someone and you invest in a relationship for, the 20 minutes that you're watching this relationship unfold. And then, like you said, to believe that, wow, so there was really all of this hidden. You and I talked off mic about Stephen King's story, A Good Marriage, where the conceit of that story is that, and you find this out very early on in the story, but, potential spoilers for it. You find out very early on that a woman who has been married to her husband for a couple of decades, that her husband is a serial killer, and she never knew about it. That's more difficult to believe necessarily that somebody could spend that much time with somebody. But what I think is key to note about The Gift is that, and we didn't really talk about this, but I'm kind of realizing that, I don't know that much. I know quite a few things that have become more relevant just in our marriage and in our life, but I don't know that much about my wife's high school experience. Like the moment that you're referring to is sort of the rich history of The Gift is basically talking about, something that took place in high school. And for me, I'm just saying, like, I do believe to a degree, to at least some degree, that it is possible junior high and high school, it's kind of its little bubble, its own little bubble where things, have happened where people are not really the way that they will eventually, well, we hope not, the way that they will eventually be, in the real world, in the adult world. And I could believe that he could have gone through his entire marriage. I mean, keep in mind, whether he's faking it or not, he does not recognize Gordo when he first meets him. That it apparently in the narrative of the film is so buried in his own mind as to not be recognizable when he sees the man as an adult. It's, I don't know. I didn't have as difficult a time buying it as
well. Let me nuance a little further. I'm not expressing a problem with this guy was a jerk 25 years ago in high school. That I don't have a problem with that at all. What I struggled with was the behavior we learned that he even still practices today, which is,
I see.
I've got dossiers on people who have wronged me and are doing background checks on people I want more info on. You know what I mean? Like, that was the stuff that I struggled with a little bit. Like, really? That's a little bit of a heavy stretch. The thing, I'm with you, like something a person did 25 years ago, not being an immediate factor in a person's life and being revealed, that doesn't bother me at all. So, right. Yeah, I mean, we don't need to spend much, really any more time there, but it was just something that, like, how much those sort of behaviors were still in practice for him was a little hard to buy in on.
Right.
But regardless, I feel like this movie's got a lot of thematic stuff to sort of brush up against or dive into, or
Absolutely,
as we typically do, just want to chat about, because again, is it thriller, is it horror, is it somewhere in the middle? I mean, I do think there are some legitimately creepy to scary scenes in this.
Oh yes.
It's funny. I was watching it with my wife in the other room, and the one I will point to as up until the last scene when he's watching the video that Gordo recorded, which is its own level of terrible.
Oh man.
The one kind of primary scary scene is when she's in the shower, and
wow. Yeah.
she detects movement outside of the shower, but it's all fogged up, it's steamed up. Well, then she wipes the steam away, and Gordo's face is right there.
Whew.
Well, I sort of elicited an, "Oh my God." And my wife just laughed from the other room. It was really funny. That was a legitimate jump moment.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I think for me, I would agree with you. Like, I think for me, the film is more just sort of playing with some uncomfortable and unsettling moments. That moment you just referenced is an unquestionable jump moment. I jumped out of my skin the first and second time I watched it. But I think in general, the film is playing more with a constant and ever increasing sense of dread that is, we've talked about before in other horror films, but I think this film really gets it right, that there's a lot of tension very early on. There's a lot of just unsettled feelings. And that's something that I really responded to. Every new moment, every new scene that happened, I just began to feel more and more tense is the only word that I can think of. Just I was constantly on the edge of my seat, even the second time around, and knowing what was really happening or what was really behind all of these events, I still was very gripped by what I was seeing. And I think that's not only a credit to the performances, but to Edgerton's sense of directorial pacing. The fact that he's able to establish these moments that create a mood and make you feel very much like, something bad is always on the horizon, which we, come to find out it absolutely is, especially for Jason Bateman's character, Simon. Something is very, very much, about to unravel and about to fall apart for him. I think, unless you had another sort of scary moment, I think there's a theme that I'd like to dive into. Did you have anything else you wanted to mention from a technical or frightening aspect of things?
I would like to pat myself on the back, which I do like to do just in life in general, but
good for you.
Thank you. I'd like to give myself a gift here. I was intentional of texting you during the movie this screenshot because I like when I can, because I don't always do this, when I can forecast or sort of call something in a movie before it's actually revealed. And the scene when Gordo invites them over and they agree against Jason Bateman's wishes to go to dinner with him, and it leads to this big confrontation. Well, it's this palatial house, and immediately you're, as a viewer, like, no way, this can't be right, And I wrote down in that moment two things: he's recording them, or it's not his house. And I was just happy to discover I was right on both accounts.
Both of them. Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something fun about a movie like this where even when you can do something like that, like it feels less predictable, as in, oh, that was lazy, and more like, okay, this is fun. this is going to be a good ride of a movie. And certainly it got there, but that's the only other sort of technical thing I would say is just, patting myself on the back. So we can move on into your themes.
Yeah. You were smart for once, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm so happy about you.
Thank you, brother.
No, I love it. We will get back to the gift literally in about 30 to 45 seconds, but I did not catch the ending of Sixth Sense. I didn't see that one coming, but, I famously called The Usual Suspects, I say famously, but
I don't believe you.
I did. I knew it like so early on. And that was such a dramatic departure from what you would expect normally. So I understand all of this to validate. I know what it feels like to need to pat yourself on the back for at least being a little bit ahead of the filmmakers or a little bit ahead of the story guy. You're like, I knew it.
You walked us into a Fear of God theme reference with The Usual Suspects, because lest we forget, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was what? Convincing the world that he didn't exist.
Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Kaiser Circe for life. Go ahead. Themes.
Well, we'll see you later, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
So the first thing that I want to talk about, there was a moment, and you know what? I should have written the quote down, but I think I'm actually going to look it up because I will censor it. There's a lot of saucy language in this.
Saucy or salty?
You know what? I think I was trying to say salty and saucy came out like SALCY, which is not a
different movie. Yeah, it's going to be a whole different podcast now.
But yeah, I don't even know that if I can quote this because there's actually so much in it. But basically, what Jason Bateman is saying is it's after his wife Robin has discovered that he mistreated Gordo in high school. And she confronts him about it. And she confronts him because she's gone behind his back. And I will say that the film kind of, in this moment specifically, but elsewhere, once you discover, for those of you who have not seen it, there is a conceit to this film. Again, spoiler alert ahead. If you have not seen this film, if you haven't seen it, see it. It's very, very good. But there's a conceit to this film that what the situation is, the reason Gordo has so sort of obsessively tried to insert himself into Simon and Robin's life is that when they were in high school, Simon and Gordo went to high school together. Simon spread a completely untrue, vicious, nasty, false rumor about Gordo just because he could, just because he was popular enough and people would believe him and basically unraveled Gordo's life to the degree that Gordo's father tried to kill him because the lie that was spread about Gordo involved him being a closet homosexual. And so basically it tempered everything that came afterwards in Gordo's life. And when Simon is confronted about having done this thing to Robin, and this is the statement that I keep trying to get out and I keep forgetting to say it, I think the film walks right up to the edge of After School Special, like right up to the edge of it with this theme. And I think it's actually a testament to it would have been so easy with a lesser script and a lesser director. It would have been so easy for this film to fall into that, on a very special blossom category, of like non-bullying and not, like things like that. But I do want to be clear that I don't think the film ever dives into that. But what I found very compelling is that after Robin confronts Simon about his mistreatment of Gordo and about his bullying, he goes off on her as like, he said, look, my life was, okay, so I'm a jerk. He doesn't use the word jerk, but he's like, okay, so I'm this terrible person and I made his life horrible. Okay. He's like, my dad was horrible to me. Treated me like garbage, but he said, I took it, I sucked it up, and I'm not on my hands and knees crying about it, praying about it. He's talking about like not being stuck in the past. And this is unusually timely. Like he says, I made something of my life. This world's about winners and losers, and we're all in the same nasty, well, he doesn't use the word nasty, but we're all in the same playground. And guess what? This guy lost, and now he's just moaning about it, and that's just him being stuck because he wants to be stuck because he can't get past that single moment. And it was very telling for me when Bateman is going off on this, that he's compartmentalizing everybody in the world in the winners and losers category and talking about Gordo clearly as hey, if he couldn't rise above that, then that's his problem. Then that's his, issue that he couldn't break free of that stereotype, that he couldn't, taking no responsibility whatsoever for a blatant and despicable lie that he spread about this kid. And we all remember high school. High school can be a tough place and it can be very challenging. Some people have very pleasant high school experiences. I think you would even say, Nathan, that you had a pleasant high school experience. I had a decidedly unpleasant high school experience. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And there's a mentality that says you've got to just get past that and move on. And the people who are, I wish that I could say it was resigned to high school, but the people like Simon who are terrible and are willing to take no responsibility for their terrible behavior and terrible choices, they just think it's everybody else's problem. And they think that because they've made it, because they've gotten past the hardships in their own life, then everybody else should just suck it up and they should all, make it past the hardships in their life and take no responsibility whatsoever for any sort of potential damage that could have been done by them just mouthing off one time because they felt like it, or as in this case, Robin asks his friend Greg, why did Simon spread this lie about Gordo? And Greg simply says, because he could.
Right.
I'm going to talk about a frightening moment because he could get away with it. He did this thing. Like this idea of just sort of, we've talked before, we talked about it, I believe in, I forget which episode, either Unfriended or Witches or something. I actually think it was Witches, about like washing your hands of responsibility for something, even though you are in a position to take responsibility for it. One of the things that I thought about was that after Simon sort of is confronted with this, he agrees to go apologize to Gordo. But when he goes to apologize to him, he basically feels like he's entitled to just be let off the hook. I mean, he definitely, it's the textbook definition of a non-heartfelt apology. And
Sure.
he basically, sort of just throws this in Gordo's face, like, look, I'm here and I'm apologizing because I want to be. Okay. So you're going to let this go? You're going to forgive me or not? Like that's the attitude, the mentality he takes. And what I thought is, I wrote this down. I said, you cannot coerce forgiveness.
Sure.
You cannot force someone to forgive you. But beyond that, you do not understand grace if you somehow feel entitled to it. You do not understand the power of forgiveness and the power of grace if you somehow feel like you automatically deserve it. Because the idea of grace is completely contrary to deserving it. We don't deserve it. We don't deserve forgiveness. We don't deserve grace. But Simon is moving through this situation as if he is absolutely entitled to be let off the hook and to be forgiven and for this all to just go.
Well, and I mean, it's really because he doesn't want to be there at all, and it reads all over him. I mean, there's nothing contrite. There's no contrition whatsoever about that encounter.
Right.
And it's interesting, because honestly, to me, the confrontational scene where he says, when he confesses to what he did, he said, why'd you do it? Well, because I could. That actually doesn't bother me as much because kids do stupid things. What I think is interesting about his character, though, is he never stopped.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a degree to which, people as teenagers, as young adults, are just prone to idiotic behavior. Like
right.
That's neither an indictment nor a defense. It just sort of is. You hope to mitigate and minimize the worst of that. But like me as a viewer, learning that about him, it's like, well, that is bad, but that's not the worst. In other words, not as in I can brush past that, but the worst about this character is the fact that he never stopped. He is still bullying and he is still seeking his own aggrandizement at the expense of others. And so that to me is the character flaw of Simon. It's not that 30 years ago he did this one thing, or 25 years ago or whatever. No, I mean, I think you make some really interesting points. There were two themes, one kind of minor, although it is major as far as just life and relevance, but it becomes a bit more minor in the movie than when I initially wrote it down. But it's interesting to me. What I wrote down is you take your problems with you. And at those first 30 minutes of the movie where you're thinking we are watching a relatively whole unit, being the two of them, Right. Before the deep fractures. But all they did was relocate without actually dealing with what are clearly the problems in their marriage. And so, in other words, you can't take your problems with you. So I do think there's a little bit of thematic thing there. But where the movie ultimately goes doesn't lend a whole lot to that idea. But piggybacking on where you're going, I feel like this movie has really created a fascinating resonance in me. It is not untrue what you said a minute ago. I mean, I had a pleasurable high school experience, which, I learned shortly after and on into adult life that was not a similar scenario for most folks. But even regardless of the overall tone, there is this interesting thing we want to do. Is it people in general? Is it American culture? Is it the church? Who knows? But we want to just say, oh, that's dumb kid stuff, or when you look, I think what you're going to have to help me wrangle some of these thoughts. It's a bit shotgun here, but I have this image of a number of years ago. I'll start it this way. A number of years ago, one of my favorite singer-songwriters, a guy named Don Chaffer, who On Again, Off Again is the band Waterdeep, with his wife Lori, in maybe Relevant Magazine or something, had written this article. And it really spoke to me because the article was an apology to a high school peer for how he had treated them. And you know, I think the impetus was just this sort of, it was about confession. It was about owning one's mistakes and taking responsibility, not just consigning a thing to the sins of youth sort of thing.
Right.
But it really sunk home with me. And this movie really speaks to this notion. And I think there's this interesting way in which we want to compartmentalize those years. And yet Jason Bateman's character and I think our lives would testify to the fact that you can't.
Right.
You know,
right.
Who you are there may not be the full version of who you are now, 15, 18, almost 20 years later, but the seeds of who you are there are definitely matured into who you are now.
Right.
And as you sort of look down the hallway of life and sort of examine, like, I don't know, I've thought this a lot lately, even unrelated to watching the movie The Gift, of the need for self-assessment and the constant need for reflection that illuminates where and when and how you have hurt people.
Yeah.
In a way that you know, whether you're like Jason Bateman's character who intended it, or in a way like most of it where we were just trying to navigate our life, but would say in navigating our life, we caused some problems for someone else. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
And what does it mean to own that in an actual faithful way that isn't just, man, I did this crappy thing to this person 20 years ago? Because I'm telling you right now, man, we live in a more connected, smaller world than we ever have in the history of mankind.
Right.
And your capacity to impart needed forgiveness, perhaps, or your capacity to request needed forgiveness has never been more in your hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, I know I'm just running off here, but I do want you to push or to bounce back some. I think it's fascinating the culture we are in right now, where responsibility for one's actions and deeds has never been less.
Right.
You know,
right.
has never been smaller. Like, you know, we are in an extremely heightened political season in our country. So some of these conversations can't be avoided if we want to talk about the world we're living in.
Right.
And I think it's interesting the level of acceptance that was given to our now president-elect's words of just 10 years ago when he was in his 50s. And the notion that, well, this happened 10 years ago. Why does that matter now?
Right, right.
And the movie The Gift is a testament to the fact that what you did 10 years ago, what you said 15 years ago, how you treated a person 15 years ago, if not addressed, you better believe that has an effect on
Absolutely.
how you currently exist in the world. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think so it's funny. I'm going to respond to just a couple of things that you said, and then bleeds rather nicely into something that I had thought about the film. So I definitely think there's two question marks I have about this film that I think the film intends for the audience to have a question mark about. The first thing is, did Simon truly not recognize Gordo when he first met him? Because, you know, when they're interacted, I take it that he genuinely did not recognize him, that he genuinely does not know who this person is initially, and then begins to sort of understand. You know, there's no dawning on him moment when he realizes, like, oh, this is the guy that I spread this nasty lie about. So it makes you wonder, did he really not know who Gordo was initially? And it's kind of an interesting thing. But the second question mark is, Gordo writes Simon a note where he says, I was willing to let bygones be bygones. And that's my second question mark, is the whether or not Simon is being genuine when he doesn't know Gordo, and whether or not Gordo is being genuine when he says he was willing to let things go. and that now it's too late. Because as the film progresses, Simon, as you said, he's still that person. So he continues to make those choices. I believe, as I know you do, we deeply believe in the power of grace. And we deeply believe that upon repentance and upon turning away from that behavior and from that mentality, I've said, I think before on this show, how I don't like the way that some celebrities or popular figures are held accountable for things that they have clearly moved past because they happened decades ago or because they happened, in a past scenario. And then it comes to light and now suddenly they're, persona non grata because of something that happened a long time ago, and they're very different people now. That's very different from the type of thing that we see in Simon and from the type of thing that we're uncertain about in our president-elect or in other sort of figures out there is, have they changed or are they still this person?
Right.
If they have changed, I think the Christian posture and I think the good posture is they've changed. Then grace says try again. So try again and have a new opportunity with a new slate to make better choices now. I deeply, deeply believe that. But the question when you're confronted with a Simon-esque figure is, are they different? Or is this continuing to be more of the same? And one of the things that I wrote down, because the one of the film's final moments, the gift of, Gordo gives Simon and Robin a number of gifts through the course of the film. But I think the definitive gift of the title is the package that Simon discovers in the end after his child has been born, after his son's been born, and
you say his child.
Oh, yeah.
But are we certain that it is his child?
We are not certain, because as we come to find out, the gift was that Simon discovers that Gordo had access to their home and made a video when Robin was unconscious, and made a video of him. Basically, it's a pretty frightening and disturbing scene.
Yeah,
but
it is.
But Gordo made a video of her passed out and him just being present, near her, being there. Doesn't film anything that he actually may or may not have done, but films being present there and deeply implying that perhaps
it's suggestive enough.
Yeah, that maybe the child that Simon and Robin have been trying to have and have now had, maybe that's not Simon's child. That's the implication given. And here's the thing: is that when Gordo talks to him about that, he says, "Okay, I didn't touch her. There you go. I didn't lay a hand on her, or did I?" And plants this sort of thing in Simon's mind. And here's what I wrote down as Simon is just in utter distress about this. I wrote down, "You will believe about others what you know to be true about yourself." You will believe, if you know yourself to be capable of deceit, you will believe treachery in other people. If you know yourself to be capable of lying, if you know yourself to be capable of bullying, if you know yourself to be capable of a threat, you will believe that about other people.
Sure.
And we almost can't escape. You talk about like needing to be self-aware and needing to really adopt some responsibility of ourselves. I think there's a significant amount of self-deception that goes on, but I think even more so, we are not really confused about who we really are. We're just in outward denial about who we really are. That in our private thoughts, as we lay our head down at night, we know what we're capable of, and we know what there might be in our interactions with other people, but we don't really ever confront those things. We don't have the courage to try to be better people. We don't have the courage to try to make different choices. Gordo says to them in their dinner, he talks about, sort of the bad things that happen. There's some good things, there's some bad things. But he says, early in the film, and this is a very on-the-nose line, but he says the bad things, they can be a gift. The bad things can be a gift. And I think in light of where the film actually goes and what the film actually winds up doing and saying, I think the point there is that sometimes it can be, what did the artist Derek Webb say? I believe it was attributed to him that he said, the best thing that could happen to you is for all of your sins to be broadcast on the 6 o'clock news, or, to be blasted on the front page. I forget the exact quote, but basically for it to all come out, that this is what you're capable of and this is who you are, that can be a very liberating thing, but you have to go through a great deal of devastation to have that. And I think that in general,
well, to address that real quick, you left off the final part of the quote, which is probably the most important, which is him saying the best thing. And you were at the 6 o'clock news. Best thing is for your sin to be broadcast on the 6 o'clock news, because then the only thing you would have to lean on is Jesus. In other words,
yes,
you have no artifice of your own that you've created anymore. It's all gone. It's all stripped away.
Right.
And I want you to finish the thought, but I think that's sort of maybe where you're going.
Yeah. And, it's funny because what I was thinking of in light of the film, the scripture that was brought to mind, the bad things, they can be a gift. There is a Bible verse that's used in the film. And the Bible verse used in the film is Psalm chapter 7, verses 15 and 16. I'll quote it again real quick. It says, "Whoever digs a hole and scoops it out falls into the pit that they've made. The trouble they cause recoils on them, and their violence comes down on their own head." That's the scripture that's used in the film, and of course is thematically appropriate. But you look one verse earlier than that, and it's probably even more frightening and perhaps even more relevant. Because Psalm chapter 7 verse 14 says this, and get this in light of the plot and the narrative of the gift. It says, "Whoever is pregnant with evil conceives trouble and gives birth to disillusionment."
Wow.
And it was something that is this film in a nutshell, is that when you are filled, pregnant with evil thoughts, evil attitudes, evil mentalities, evil things that you have done, that you've not taken responsibility for, that you've not reconciled for, then you are going to give birth. You conceive trouble and you give birth to disillusionment. What happens to Simon at the end of the film?
Right.
He is going to be forever. Well, first of all, he's lost his career. He's lost his family, and he's going to forever be haunted by the question mark that I get the impression Gordo is never going to relieve one way or another, of whether or not that's really his child, and whether or not this horrible thing has happened. And it's a frightening thing to recognize that sometimes what it takes to confront ourselves is just a devastating mirror that comes and the same exact thing that we have done to other people. I mean, I don't remember the exact reference, but a person's going to reap what they sow.
Right.
That, don't be deceived, that whatever God is not mocked, whatever someone sows, they are going to reap that. And it's a frightening thing to come to terms with.
Well, and interestingly, I don't think the movie actually intends, I could be wrong. I don't know that the movie intends a hopeful ending, for Simon there, but at the same time, I don't know that's totally true either. So yes, actually in the movie, I think Gordo may actually reference this. It didn't originate with this band, but it made me think of the U2 quote, they say a liar won't believe anyone else. And he sort of says that to Simon. And it's a fascinating truth for him because, and you make a good point, or you brushed up against this a minute ago, of how we view the world is naturally how we anticipate everybody else does too.
Right. Right.
Which is why someone like me, who's hopelessly and occasionally naive, but hopelessly optimistic, naturally presumes, "Oh, you're a trustworthy person." My wife tells me I'm too trusting, and gets me in trouble. But fascinatingly, it is curious to me if there's an intended hopefulness to the end, because, and the only reason I would say that is that line you reference, like that's as the on the nose line that says bad things can be gifts too. And you can't deny, although slightly perverse or inverted, that inherently a gift is meant as a positive thing. So there's this contrast happening there. And I thought this is where you were going a minute ago, this notion of your sins, the worst of you being broadcast because you have nothing left to lean on. That is where Simon is. And there's actually, in a faithful view of life and people, there's a hopeful moment there. You know what I mean? Like the artifice he has created. Like Gordo is a blunt hammer and has broken the cycle of Simon's life.
Yes, absolutely.
And no one in life or in observing what this character goes through would wish that on someone. But at the same time, the Simon you see at the end of the movie is broken. He is defeated. his own methods have been used against him in a way that he always used against other people, regardless of who actually ultimately, whether it was Gordo or not, although you could say that was the source of this sort of pattern of bullying people and lying and creating falsehoods. But I do think if you were to cut ahead 6 months, you said this is not a Hallmark movie, but has notes and airs of that, I could perceive a hopeful resolution for that character. You know what I mean? Like, like a humbling has occurred to him of the worst kind, and that humbling could actually lead to a repentant kind of position in life. I don't know. That's conjecture, but I could see where that's a possibility. And like I said, does the movie intend that? I would not lean into that, except for it does quote scripture, which, lots of things do that, but you're invoking Judeo-Christian sort of thought and philosophy there. Right. And also the line, bad things can become gifts, or can be gifts, I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting thought.
I think as a possible final note, not whether or not the film intends that, I think two things. First of all, some of whether or not you believe that may say more about you than it does about the film. And I think that's one of the brilliant aspects of this film, is that it does leave a couple of question marks with enough evidence on either side that some of it you're going to walk away and it'll probably reveal a little bit about you and about how you see the world, how you think, what happens next, even to the degree of whether or not you think he actually did what he implied that he did. It's like that says something about how you see things, and whether or not Simon will take this reckoning and make better choices next time. I know that it is possible for people to do that. I know that it is possible for people to have their whole world fall apart and then use that to start making better choices and better decisions, to a more hopeful degree, and maybe that's ultimately the imperative behind being confronted with your own ugliness and being confronted with your own, the culpability for the evil and the nastiness that you've fostered in the world, is the opportunity that now, having been confronted with it, like Ebenezer Scrooge, to throw a Christmas reference in there, like Ebenezer Scrooge, it's not too late, and you've done a lot of bad things and you've cast a lot of things off, but tomorrow you can start anew. And grace says, try again. The Lord's mercies are brand new every morning. They're not used up from the night before. You can start again tomorrow and begin making better choices. And of course, you'll have consequences to deal with. Of course, there will be some repair and recovery time, but that doesn't change the fact that you can begin anew tomorrow. Fresh day, new chance. And
it's almost like a gift.
It's like a gift. That's why they call it the present. The tagline on this movie, which I think is a little punny, but quite clever, is "Your past will be your present." That's the tagline on the film.
That's actual?
Yeah, it's one of them. I mean, there's like three or four, as there are with every film, but one of them is "Your past will be your present." But I think, unless you had anything else burning, I think we'll leave it there.
The other one was "Keep the receipt."
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. You need to go to bed. It's too late for you. This is too much time. Listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this conversation. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it's not the end of the conversation, as we say every episode. And next week, before we give you our social media cues, next week is going to be our Christmas special, if you will. I'll let you look on social media to see what we're actually going to be talking about. But next week is going to be an episode I'm very excited to present to you guys. But in the meantime,
you just said present.
I did. But in the meantime, you can continue to discuss the gift with us in a number of ways. You can reach out to us on Twitter. Nathan, what's our Twitter handle?
At the Fear of God.
At the Fear of God. And then you can also like us on Facebook or post to us there. You can follow me on Twitter at Reed Lackey. And Nathan, they can find you on Twitter
at the Nathan Rouse.
And you can also go to morethanonelesson.com to leave a post or to leave a comment on this particular post. You can email us at fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com. You could also go to iTunes, and if you've enjoyed this episode, we'd really love for you to leave us a review there. It's definitely the best way for our listenership to grow and for, to get the word out there about us. In the meantime, we'll anticipate that you're having a very happy holiday season and a Merry Christmas, and we will see you guys next week. Nathan, thank you so much for having this chat with me, man. I appreciate it.
Indeed, it's been a gift.
We'll see you guys next week.